Riala knelt in the dirt, her hands bound behind her back, her eyes wide with fear and filled with tears. The cold wind blew through the open yard of the prison camp, and her thin cloak did little to keep her warm. Her voice was weak from crying, but she kept speaking again and again to the tall figure in front of her, begging him not to kill her son. "He is just a child," she said. "Please, I am begging you. I will do anything. Just spare him." The human officer stood in silence, his tall frame like a shadow under the pale sky. He wore black armor scratched from many battles, and a scar ran down his cheek, but his eyes were calm and unreadable. His name was Commander Holt, and many feared him even among his own soldiers. He was known as a man who followed orders without question and never showed mercy. Around them stood guards, both alien and human. Some looked away uncomfortable, while others watched with cold eyes, waiting for the command to take the child away. Riala turned her head toward the small cage nearby, where her son Taran was locked inside. He was shaking, trying to be brave, but she could see his fear even from this distance. His small hands clutched the bars, and his red eyes stared at her without blinking. "He did not do anything," she said, her voice cracking. "He is not a spy. He is not a soldier. He does not even understand the war." The wind carried her words into the sky, but Holt did not answer. He only looked at her, then looked at the boy, then looked back at her again. Something passed through his eyes, something strange and quick, but it was gone before anyone else could see it. He turned around slowly and walked away without saying a word. The guards waited for orders, but none came. Holt disappeared into his command tent and left them all standing in silence. Riala felt her heart sink. She thought he had turned his back on her. She thought it was over. Taran cried from the cage, calling for his mother, but the guards told him to be quiet. They were rough and cruel, and one of them hit the cage with the butt of his weapon, making the boy jump back in fear. Inside the tent, Holt sat alone. He poured himself a glass of water, but did not drink it. He just stared at it, as if trying to see something inside it. Memories from the past rushed through his mind. A girl with brown hair and blue eyes screaming during a raid, a burning house, the sound of explosions, and the sharp smell of fire. He had failed to save her years ago, on a different world, in a different war. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He did not want to remember, but the boy's face reminded him too much of her, of the mistake he never forgave himself for. Outside the camp, the skies turned darker, storm clouds gathering in the distance. Thunder rumbled across the horizon, but the air remained dry and cold, as if waiting for something. Night fell, and the guards changed shifts. Some whispered about Holt's silence. Others joked that the alien mother would cry herself to death before morning. But one guard, a young woman named Reyes, kept her eyes on the command tent. Something about Holt's face had bothered her all day. He was not acting like himself. Inside the cage, Taran curled up in the corner, trying to stay warm. He did not understand why they thought he was a spy. He only went into the field to look for his pet. He saw something shiny. He picked it up, and then everything happened too fast. Humans grabbed him, questioned him, accused him. He did not even know what they were talking about. His mother had come for him right away, and now she was suffering because of him. He buried his face in his arms and tried not to cry again. Back in the command tent, Holt opened the file again. Taran, age 11, species Euron, no training, no record of contact with enemy forces, no sign of threat. Just a boy from a farming village, caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. Holt tapped his fingers on the table. He knew what the council wanted. They wanted to make an example of the boy, to scare the other alien tribes, to show strength and control. He had seen it before, innocent lives used as weapons in political games. He stood up quietly and reached for his communicator. He hesitated only a moment, then spoke in a low voice. "Bring the boy to me alone. Do not tell anyone." The voice on the other end asked if he was sure. Holt answered with a single word, "Yes." 10 minutes later, the cage was opened, and Taran was brought to the tent by a soldier who did not ask questions. Holt dismissed the guard and closed the tent behind him. He knelt down to the boy's level and looked at him for a long time. "Do you know why they want to hurt you?" he asked gently. Taran shook his head, eyes wide and red from crying. He whispered, "I just picked up something shiny. I did not know it was important." Holt nodded slowly. He reached into his pack and handed the boy a piece of bread and a blanket. The boy hesitated, then took it with shaking hands and sat down on the floor. Holt looked at him and then looked away. The past and the present crashing together in his mind. The silence and the tent was heavy, but something had changed. Something important had begun. I will not let them touch you, he whispered. Commander Holt sat beside the small heater, in his tent, the light flickering across his face as shadows danced on the canvas walls. The boy was asleep, wrapped in the old army blanket, curled into a quiet corner. Like a frightened animal, Holt had seen many things during the war, but this moment felt different. It was not about orders, not about battle or strategy. It was about a decision, one that pulled at something deep inside him, something buried under years of armor and silence. Outside, the wind howled across the open desert of Virion. The cold biting through even the thickest jacket. Soldiers moved from post to post, unaware that the boy they had been ordered to execute now slept a few meters away from their leader. Holt rose from his seat and walked slowly to his desk. Papers scattered across it, half-read reports, maps, and official orders, all waiting for action, but his eyes were drawn to one sheet, in particular the one with the boy's name: Terran, species Euron, male, 11 cycles, no military record possible, unauthorized contact with human tech, classified as minor threat, pending final decision from High Command. He picked up the paper and crumpled it in his fist. He walked to the small heater and held the paper above the flames, letting it catch fire and disappear in seconds. The boy would not be a threat, not now, not ever. Holt would make sure of it. He sat back down, rubbing his temples, the weight of command suddenly heavier than usual. He had followed orders his whole life, but this one he could not carry out, not this time, not to a child who had done nothing wrong. The tent flap opened quietly, and a familiar voice spoke. So the patrol reports are an enemy movement near the East Ridge, and a supply drop missed its mark. It was Lieutenant Reyes, always on time, always sharp, but Holt only nodded without turning. Leave the report on the table, he said quietly, then hesitated. Wait, close the flap behind you and sit down. Reyes raised an eyebrow, but obeyed without question. She stepped inside the tent, the cold air following her, and sat down across from him. She glanced at the sleeping boy, but said nothing. I know what this looks like, Holt began, his voice low. I know the rules and the risks, but that boy is not a spy. He's not a soldier. He's just a scared kid who made a mistake. Reyes looked at him carefully, studying his face, the lines, the tired eyes, the hesitation. I figured it was something like that, she said finally. I saw the fear in his mother's eyes, and the way you looked at the cage earlier. I knew you weren't going to let it end like that. You understand what this means, right? Holt asked. If Command finds out I disobeyed protocol, they'll strip my rank, maybe worse. And if the Alien Council hears about this, they'll accuse us of hiding war criminals. Reyes nodded slowly, but she didn't look afraid. I'll help you, she said simply. I don't care about the council or the rules, not when it comes to something like this. What's the plan? Holt leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. I want to get him out of here, send him somewhere safe, away from the camps, away from the eyes of Command. There's an old outpost in Sector 9, abandoned 2 years ago, but the med station still works, and it is shelter. Reyes tapped her fingers against her knee, thinking quickly. I can take him there tonight. I know the route. I can mask the transport signal and go dark for a few hours. No one will know. You'd risk your career for this? Holt asked, watching her closely. I've seen too many innocent lives burned for politics, and fear, she replied. This is something worth risking for. Holt nodded again, grateful, though he said nothing more. He turned toward the sleeping boy and gently shook his shoulder. Terran opened his eyes, slowly blinking in confusion. Time to go, kid, Holt said softly. We're moving you somewhere safe. Terran sat up, rubbing his eyes. Do I have to go alone? No, Holt said. Reyes here will stay with you. She's one of the good ones, better than me. Terran looked at Reyes, then back at Holt. Do you promise I'll see my mom again? The question hit like a punch to the chest. Holt hesitated, then gave a slow nod. I promise I'll find a way. Outside the camp, the night grew colder, the stars bright and sharp against the black sky. Reyes loaded the boy onto a small hover transport, covering him with extra blankets and securing the route coordinates, while Holt watched from the shadows. Move fast, stay off the main paths, and use signal jammers, Holt instructed. If they catch you, tell them you were acting under direct orders. Reyes smirked and gave a mock salute. Understood, sir. And Holt, one last thing. Yes, you're not as heartless as they say. Then she climbed into the vehicle and vanished into the night, the hum of the engine fading quickly until silence returned. Back inside the camp, Holt returned to his tent, But it no longer felt the same. The heater was still on, but the space felt empty. He looked at the chair where the boy had slept and felt a strange ache deep in his chest. He had made a choice, and it would not be the last. Morning came, and with it questions. Rumors spread that the alien boy was missing. The cage stood open. The guards claimed they had seen nothing, and Commander Holt gave no answers. The alien council member Jurak arrived later that day, a tall, cruel figure from the enemy tribes, his skin pale and eyes sharp. He wasted no time demanding answers. "Where's the boy?" he shouted. "This is a violation of the agreement we made." Holt stood before him, calm and unreadable. "I do not answer to you," he said. "The boy was found innocent and released as per new review of his case." "Lies," Jurak spat. "We have witnesses. We demand his return." "You will get nothing from me," Holt replied. "The boy is gone, and you have no power here." Jurak stormed out, but the warning was clear. He would not let this go, and neither would the High Command if they found out. That evening, Holt received a private message on his secure line. It was a voice recording from Reyes, made just minutes before she reached the outpost. "We made it. No contact, no trouble. The kid's safe, scared, but doing okay. He asked about you and his mom. I told him we'll get her next. Reyes out." Holt closed the file and sat in silence for a long time. Outside, soldiers moved like shadows across the camp, unaware that one of the most dangerous men among them had just committed treason for a boy he barely knew. In the distance, lightning flashed across the horizon, and thunder rolled like the drums of war. Something was coming. He could feel it in the air. Choices had been made, lines had been crossed, and soon there would be consequences. But for now the boy was safe, and that was enough. The morning sun rose over the desert camp, casting long shadows across the sand. The sharp cry of metal doors echoed as guards began their rounds, but something was different. The tension in the air was heavy, as if the camp itself held its breath, waiting for something to happen. Rumors had started before dawn, whispers of the missing boy, and how the cage had been found empty, with no trace of escape. In the mess hall, soldiers spoke in low voices, eyes darting around as they tried to guess who knew what. Some believed the boy had escaped. Others said the aliens had taken him back, but a few smarter ones said nothing at all, for they had seen Commander Holt's face that morning, and it did not wear the cold mask they knew so well. Instead, it showed something unfamiliar, something dangerous. Restraint. In the command tent, Holt reviewed files with quick movements, scanning reports that told him nothing new. The boy was gone. Reyes was safe. The outpost silent. No alerts, no transmissions, no signs of pursuit. But it would not stay quiet for long. He knew that eyes were already watching, ears were already listening, and somewhere someone was already planning their next move. Riala sat in the holding pen. Her wrists bruised, her knees scraped, her heart broken. She had seen them take her son in the night. She had watched from a small crack in the wall. Her breath held tight as Holt led him away, wrapped in warmth. Not chains. Her hope had lit for a moment, but then the guards came again, beat her again, left her in the dirt again. Now she waited, not for death, but for what would come next, her soul clinging to the memory of her son's eyes. One last time. Jurak arrived in the camp under heavy guard, his personal ship descending with the roar of fire and dust. His armor gleamed sharp and silver, his eyes colder than the metal that lined his gloves. He stepped down the ramp and did not wait for greetings. Instead, he marched straight toward Holt's tent, demanding answers, demanding justice, demanding blood. "The boy was not yours to release," he growled, his voice thick with hatred. "Your humans have no right to interfere in our justice." Holt stood without flinching, his tone: "Even your justice seeks to kill children. Mine does not. The council will hear of this," Jurak snapped, "and they will not forget this insult. You think your rank protects you, but peace is fragile, and blood calls to blood." Holt said nothing, his silence louder than any insult. As Jurak turned and stormed away, the air seemed colder after he left, and even the wind grew still, as if watching. Inside the armory, two soldiers whispered behind crates. One was named Sykes, a tall man with sharp teeth and quicker hands. The other was Bren, younger, quieter, but with eyes that missed nothing. They spoke of the boy, how Reyes had been seen moving equipment at night, how the transport had been gone for 2 hours, with no log, no trace, no reason. "You think she helped the kid?" Sykes asked, scratching his beard. "She's not that stupid." "You saw Holt yesterday," Bren replied, his voice low. He looked like a man who already made a choice, and Reyes follows him like a shadow always has. Sykes nodded slowly, then pulled a small transmitter from his pocket, flicking it on. and whispering to someone unknown target, confirmed child, moved by Rhea's possible order, from Holt request next step. Bren looked at him, shocked. What are you doing? That's treason. Sykes grinned. War has no sides, kid, only winners and losers, and I don't plan on being the second. At the outer rim of the camp, Holt walked the perimeter, his eyes scanning the dunes, his thoughts spinning like dust devils. He knew it would not take long for someone to speak. Someone always did, and when the questions came, he needed to be ready. He needed a plan. Later in the day, he visited Riala for the first time since the night of the escape. She looked up as he entered, her eyes tired but full of fire. Is he safe? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. He nodded, once not speaking. She closed her eyes and breathed slow and deep. Thank you. I don't care what happens to me now as long as he lives. Holt knelt beside her and spoke in a voice no one had ever heard from him before. I will get you out too. I don't know how yet, but I will. She looked at him, confused. Why are you doing this? Why would a human help me? He did not answer, not with words, only with a look, one that spoke of broken pasts and lost children and the heavy weight of regret. Meanwhile, Reyes remained hidden at the outpost, tending to Taryn, who had finally begun to smile again. The small boy asked questions about the stars, about the war, about Holt. She answered what she could and promised that his mother would come soon, though she did not know how or when. Then came the message. A single code sent her a private line, intercepted chatter identifying the boy location, compromised unknown units mobilizing, threat level high. She packed quickly, waking Taryn and leading him to the bunker beneath the outpost. This is your safe room, she said. You stay here. No matter what happens, no noise, no light, not until I come back for you. But what if you don't come back? He asked, fear rising again. She knelt and hugged him tight, then pressed a small tag into his hand. If I don't come back, find a man who gave you bread. He will know what to do. Back at the main camp, Holt received a message from his internal security channel. Movement detected near Sector 9. Unknown signals scrambled. Possibly military, possibly not. He felt the air shift. The storm was coming, and it would not be silent. He returned to his quarters and opened a private drawer. Inside was a hidden communicator, one tied to an old contact, a smuggler named Vex, a liar, a thief, but loyal when paid well enough. I need an extraction, Holt said, fast and quiet. Pickup for 2, maybe 3 cargo, not negotiable. Vex laughed on the other, and someone finally breaking that iron mask of yours. All right, send me the coordinates. I'll be there in 20 hours. No questions, unless bullets fly. Then I scream and run. Holt ended the call and looked toward the stars, wondering if 20 hours would be enough, if the fire would hold back. Until then, if the choice he made in silence would echo in blood. As night fell again across the camp, another figure moved in secret. Sykes, with a data stick filled with recordings of Reyes, her route, her stolen supplies, and the name Holt spoken too many times to be denied. He handed the stick to Jurak, who smiled with sharp teeth. Let the council see what your honor looks like, he said. Let the humans choke on their own shame. The trap had been set. The players were moving, and in the center of it all a child waited, hidden beneath a mountain of dust and silence, while the world prepared to burn. The council ship arrived like a thundercloud, painted in black and silver, stretching across the sky with a low, vibrating hum that shook the bones of every creature watching from below. Soldiers lined up, weapons at their sides, backs straight, minds racing. No one liked it when the High Council came down from their towers, not for meetings, not for war, and never for justice, because justice in their language meant punishment, and someone was going to bleed. Commander Holt stood at the edge of the landing zone, his face like stone, his hands behind his back, his eyes watching every movement with sharp, quiet focus. Behind him, Riala waited in chains, her face bruised, but proud. Beside her stood Jurak, glowing with false pride, his voice loud as he welcomed the council delegates like a loyal servant, bringing meat to the table. He had already told them his version of the story, already painted Holt as a traitor, already prepared the knife. From the council ship emerged 3 beings, tall, wrapped in flowing robes, each one marked with golden stripes and deep red emblems that shimmered like fire. They did not speak right away. They only looked first at Jurak, then at Holt, then at Riala, then back to each other, and something unspoken passed between them, like a signal, like a verdict. You will explain now, the center figure said, voice soft but strong. Why has this child been taken? Why has this woman not been released? Why is the human commander accused of breaking our agreement? Jurak bowed low, his head touching the sand. I followed your orders. I captured the child. I prepared the trial. And I waited for you. But the human officer took the child without permission and hid him from all of us. Then he let the mother believe her child would live only to deceive us all. That is a lie, Holt said flat. In cold, I protected the child. Because he is innocent, the first reviewed every report. I questioned him myself. He had no weapon, no plan, no knowledge of war. He found a metal chip on accident, and you called him a spy. You did not have the authority to release him, the council member replied. You acted alone, without our approval, without the chain of command. Then strip my rank, Holt said. If that is the cost of protecting a child, I will wear it with pride. The council members looked at each other again. Then one stepped forward, bring the woman. 2 guards dragged Riala forward, her feet, stumbling her head, held high her eyes, never blinking. She looked at the council and said only one thing. He saved my son. He did what your own laws would not do. He saw my child and chose mercy over power. The council did not respond, but Jurak did, with a sneer. Enough of this. The human is clearly guilty. He has defied protocol. He has hidden a war criminal. He has refused orders. What more do you need to see? One council member raised a hand. Silence fell like winter. Where's the child? The voice asked, not to Holt, not to Jurak, but to Riala. She hesitated for only a second, then spoke quietly. I do not know where they took him. I only know he is safe. The council turned now to Holt again. Where's the boy? Holt remained still, eyes fixed on the speaker. I will not say. Then you understand what that means, the voice said slowly. The council does not forgive those who hide fugitives. He is not a fugitive, Holt said. He is a boy. A soldier ran across the field, then panting, holding a small device, and handed it to Jurak. Sir, urgent message it is, from the border scouts. Jurak pressed the device, and a voice came through, angry and scared. We found them. The outpost is active. Reyes is there, and the child too. We are moving in now, awaiting your orders. The council turned sharply. Reyes, Holt said under his breath, then louder. Call them back. Now that boy is under my protection. You have no protection now, Jurak said, grinning. You gave that up when you betrayed your oath. One of the council members raised their hand again. Enough, this trial ends now, Commander. Holt, you are relieved of duty. Until further notice, you are ordered to remain in this camp until your actions are reviewed by the Greater Council. And the boy, Holt asked. The boy will be brought here for proper judgment, the voice replied, cold and final. Reyes watched from the bunker through the old screen, her breath tight, her heart pounding, the dust outside rising as enemy soldiers closed in. She had heard the message. She knew they were coming. She knew the clock had run out. Terrence stood beside her, holding the small tag. Holt had given him, his eyes wide with fear, but he did not cry. What do we do now? He whispered. Reyes looked at him, then looked at the bag in her hand, then at the old vents running under the outpost. We do what Holt would do. We run. She lifted the floor panel and helped him crawl into the vent, pushing the bag in after him. You go to the end. You'll find a hatch. It leads to a ravine. Crawl out and hide in the rocks. I'll draw them away. But what about you? He said, his voice shaking. Reyes smiled soft and sad. I'll be right behind you. Now go, and don't stop until you see stars again. She closed the vent and turned as the door shattered under the force of enemy weapons. Smoke filled the room. Voices shouted. She ran to the far wall, pulled down crates, fired once, then vanished through the side entrance, drawing them away like a ghost. In the camp, Holt waited, eyes on the sky. He had heard the message too. He knew Reyes would never surrender, never leave a boy behind. He felt the storm break in his chest and knew what he had to do. He turned to the nearest comm tower and overrode the controls. This is Commander Holt requesting emergency extraction to coordinate Sector 9 priority code. Red child extraction, enemy pursuit. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. The council shouted behind him. Guards moved to stop him, but he held his ground. You want justice? Then look at what you're doing, chasing children into hiding with guns and fear. If that is your peace, then it is already broken. The signal went out into the stars, carried by static and fire, hoping someone was listening, someone who still believed in honor, someone who could get there before it was too late. Far across the desert beneath the rocks, Taran crawled forward, his hands scraped, his knees bruised, but he moved like Holt had told him, like Reyes had shown him, one breath, one step, one heartbeat at a time, until the stars opened above him and he saw the night sky again wide and waiting. He looked back, once hoping to see Reyes, hoping to hear her voice, but only silence answered. He pulled the tag from his pocket, looked at it, and whispered, "I'm still here." And above the clouds, engines moved, cutting through the dark. Something was coming. Darkness wrapped the desert like a blanket, cold and endless. The stars above flickered faint, as if watching from a great distance. The boy moved through the rocks, one slow step at a time. His body scraped his breath shallow, but his grip on the small tag in his hand never loosened. It was the only thing that made him feel real. It made him feel safe, made him remember that someone had once chosen to protect him. Taryn reached the edge of the ravine, where the cliffs curved into jagged stone, and dust swirled around his legs. The silence pressed against his ears louder than sound, and he sat there in the shadows, knees to his chest, wondering if Reyes would ever come, if his mother was still alive, if the humans who helped him would be punished or worse. Behind him, faint sounds began to echo, voices, crunching boots, and the humming rise of an engine. Someone was searching, someone was close, and he had nowhere left to go. Far away across the red plains, a single ship broke the clouds, sleek and fast, its lights low as it curved toward the ground. The pilot's eyes scanned the screens, hands steady on the controls. Vexed, the smuggler leaned back, chewing on a small metal pin and muttering to himself. Always in the worst places, always for the worst reasons. He grinned to no one in particular, but money talks, and Holt pays. And when Holt pays, it means something bad is coming. He checked the coordinates again, saw the flare marker Holt had embedded in the emergency code, and banked the ship lower, fast and silent, gliding like a shadow across the land. At the camp, alarms screamed, red lights flashed, and soldiers scrambled like ants. Holt stood in the command tower, hands locked behind his back, watching the chaos below as the council members shouted at each other, trying to decide whether to call reinforcements or declare open war. Jurok was furious, his face red, his teeth bared. He stormed toward Holt, flanked by guards, pointing his sharp finger at the human commander. "You caused this," he yelled, "you and your soft heart and your lies. The child was supposed to be in chains, and now your precious officer has ruined everything." Holt did not move, did not blink, his voice calm but firm. "That child is worth more than your politics, more than your pride, and more than the twisted justice you pretend to serve." The council demanded silence, demanded order, but Holt turned away, walking from the room like a man with nothing left to lose. He reached the barracks, opened a hidden locker, pulled out his old gear, body armor, scarred helmet, scratched rifle, long and worn. His hands moved like they remembered every buckle, every strap, every weight. "One last run," he said to himself, "one last choice." Riala sat in her cell, eyes closed, fingers moving slowly across the dusty floor, as if drawing symbols only she could see. When Holt arrived, she looked up, her face unreadable, but her voice soft. "Is he alive?" "Yes," Holt answered, "but not safe, not yet. I am going to get him out. I will come back for you after." She nodded slowly. "I believe you, even if no one else does." He opened the door, took her hand, and placed something cold inside it, a metal key, small and old. "This opens the utility hatch behind the water tower. When the guards change shift, go and wait. I will find you when it is done." Then he was gone, fading into the night like the desert wind. At the edge of the ravine, soldiers moved with flashlights, scanning rocks, shouting orders. Reyes was caught between shadows, breathing heavy, blood running down her arm from a wound near her shoulder. She had led them away as long as she could, but they were closing in, and she was out of time. She climbed the ridge, her feet slipping on loose stone, and saw him crouched near the boulders, eyes wide. When he spotted her, she smiled through the pain and waved him over. "We have to move now," she whispered. "We are not safe yet." Taryn ran to her and helped her stand together. They stumbled across the rocks toward the old beacon tower, half buried under sand and ash. It was dead, rusted, useless, but beneath it was a crawl space, just wide enough to hide in, and they slipped inside moments before the first soldiers crested the ridge. Breath held still, hearts pounding, they waited. Then a sound cut through the night, sharp and sudden, an engine roar, a ship diving fast with lights off and landing skids out. The soldiers turned in shock, aiming weapons, shouting commands, and that is when Holt struck. He came from the west like a storm, rifle raised by low, using the terrain like a ghost. He fired fast, taking down two with stun rounds, then rolled behind a boulder and fired again, clearing a path toward the beacon. Vex's ship hovered just above the ridge, its side doors open, engines ready, flaring hot and loud as sand and wind screamed. Reyes looked at the boy, then pushed him toward the light. Run. Now, she shouted, don't look back. He ran, stumbling, tripping, then rising again, arms pumping, legs flying, as Holt met him halfway, scooping him up and turning to fire again. Behind them, Reyes stumbled out, her legs weak, but moving fast, her hands covered in blood as she made the final dash toward the ship. One soldier reached for her weapon raised, but Holt turned and took the shot's shoulder, twisting body, slamming into the ground, but never letting go of the boy. The ramp closed, the ship lifted and vanished into the stars before the rest could catch their breath. Inside, Taryn screamed for Holt, who lay still, eyes open, barely breathing. Reyes crawled over, trying to stop the bleeding, but the wound was deep, armor cracked, ribs broken. You made it, he whispered. You got him out. You too, she said, but her voice shook. Not yet, he said, not done. Then closed his eyes. Back at the camp, Riala slipped through the hatch, cloak pulled tight around her face, moving like a shadow through the maze of pipes and storage crates until she reached the empty landing pad. She looked up, saw the flare trail, and smiled. They made it. Then the council alarms roared, and everything changed. The ship tore through the upper winds, engines screaming against the thin air as Vex pushed it harder than he ever had. His fingers danced across the controls, steady and sharp, but even he could feel the weight inside the hull, the weight of something more than cargo, the weight of a wounded soldier, a hunted child, and the choice to stand against a wall of war for a single spark of mercy. In the back, Holt lay still, blood soaking through his armor, his chest rising and falling with a slow, uneven rhythm. Reyes knelt beside him, pressing rags into the wound, trying to hold it all together, her face pale, her arms shaking, but her voice steady. You stay with me, she said. You hear me? This kid needs you. I need you. We are not done yet. Terrence sat nearby, knees hugged to his chest, his eyes locked on Holt's face, refusing to look away. His hands gripped the small metal tag so tightly it left marks in his skin, but he did not let go, not once, not for a second. Vex called out from the cockpit. We have a problem. I just picked up 4 signals. Behind us, not council ships, something else, fast, military class, older models, but fast. They're coming from the north, Vector 10, high altitude. They know where we are. Reyes didn't answer right away. She looked down at Holt and up at Taryn, then back toward the ship wall, as if seeing through it, past the metal and wires, into the storm that waited beyond. How long? She called back. 5 minutes, if we are lucky. 3, if they push hard, Vex replied. Engines are already hot. We are running full burn. They are still gaining. She stood slowly, moved to the rear panel, and opened the weapons locker. Most of it was old, patched-together junk, but one thing still worked, a twin-linked burst cannon tied into the underbelly. She flipped a power switch and watched the blue light blink on 1, 2, 3, ready. Taryn followed, her eyes wide. Are we going to crash? Not if I shoot straight, she said, and gave him a small smile. Not if Holt taught me well enough. She moved to the gun mount, strapped herself in, and pulled the visor down. Screens lit up, showing the sky. Behind them, 4 dots, sharp and moving closer. She counted her breaths like Holt had taught her. 1 for calm, 1 for courage, 1 for fire. The first enemy ship opened fire, a burst of red slicing through the clouds, missing by meters, but shaking the hull. Vex swore and tilted hard left. Reyes fired back the twin cannons, roaring a trail of light sweeping across the sky. The enemy twisted out of the path and split into 2 groups, coming fast from both sides. Reyes stayed focused, eyes on the lead ship, heart pounding, but hands steady. She waited until the second ship broke formation, then fired again. This time the shots landed hard, ripping into the wing. Sparks and fire burst out as the ship spun and vanished into smoke. 1 down, she whispered. 3 more to go. Taryn held onto the wall as the ship rocked. Holt groaned behind him, trying to move, but his body refused to listen. His breath came in gasps, each one thinner than the last. Reyes, he whispered, his voice barely there. She turned her head for a second. I'm here. Just hang on. We are almost clear. He shook his head, slow and weak. Not clear. Not yet. Listen, Vex is headed toward Ridge 9. There is an old signal tower there under the rocks. If you light the beacon, maybe they will see us. Maybe someone will help. Who? Reyes asked. Who is they? He coughed. Once the Alliance remnant. The old ones, the ones who never gave up their monitor, that channel, still waiting, watching. She looked at him, unsure, then back at the screens. The enemy ships were still chasing, still firing. One more blast hit near the tail. Vex cursed again. We lost shielding back end. Is fried. One more hit, and we are dropping like stones. Reyes made her choice fast. She switched to manual, fired 3 rounds, at once caught one enemy in the wing, and watched it spiral away, then unstrapped herself, and ran back. To Vex, you need to land. Now take us to Ridge 9. That is suicide, he shouted. So is flying with a dead engine, and no backup. She snapped, land now, or we all die anyway. Vex growled, but turned the ship east, banking hard, and diving through the clouds. The enemy followed, guns blazing. The desert rose below them, sharp rocks, jagged cliffs, storm winds tearing at the hull. Reyes grabbed the emergency flare kit, shoved it into a pack, then knelt beside Taryn and handed him the tag again. Listen to me, you take this, and go. When the ship hits ground, you run for the rocks, find the beacon, and light it, just like Holt said. But what about you, he asked, voice trembling. I will be right behind you, she said, but her eyes said more. Her eyes said, maybe not. Her eyes said goodbye. The ship hit the ridge hard, sliding across the stone with a roar, sparks, flying metal tearing. Vex fought the controls, screamed at the engines, cursed every god he knew, but somehow kept it level long enough to stop near the tower's base. Go, Reyes shouted, pulling Taryn to the ramp. Go now. He ran, stumbling through the smoke toward the rocks. Behind him, Reyes grabbed her rifle and followed. Vex stayed at the controls, firing one last burst at the final enemy ship, buying them a few more seconds before turning and grabbing his own pack. Reyes and Taryn reached the beacon tower, half buried in sand and cracked by time. She pulled off the cover, found the old signal plate, and slammed the flare into place. Sparks flew, lights blinked, and a low hum started to rise into the sky. Come on, she whispered as the enemy ship descended fast, and angry weapons ready. Taryn looked up, his face covered in dust, his hands shaking, but his voice strong. Please work, please. The signal reached the upper air, a sharp, bright pulse on a dead channel, and somewhere above the clouds another ship moved, silent, and hidden, its crew old warriors from a forgotten fleet, watching, waiting, and now responding. The enemy ship prepared to fire, targeting systems locked, engines ready, but then a new light split the sky, white and gold, and fierce a beam from above, a shot from nowhere, and the enemy ship exploded in flame and metal. Reyes fell back in shock, eyes wide. Who? Taryn looked up and saw it, a ship painted in gray and silver, with the old crest of the Alliance blazing on the side. It hovered above them, doors open, guns ready. A voice crackled on the comm. This is Falcon 2 responding to signal, hold position. We are coming down. Reyes dropped her rifle and grabbed Taryn, holding him closer, breath shaking, her heart pounding, but for the first time in forever, filled with something like hope. Behind them, Holt stirred in the wreckage of Vex's ship, his eyes fluttering open, his breath slow but steady. He heard the engines above and smiled just a little. You found them, he whispered, then let the dark take him again. The ramp opened with a soft hiss, and the dust swept into the air around it, the wind of the high cliffs catching strands of hair and scattered leaves. As armored boots touched down on red earth, they came like ghosts from another war. Their armor scratched, their flags faded, but their weapons sharp and eyes sharper. Still 5 of them moved forward in a wide pattern, and one stepped ahead, taller, older, a long scar across his jaw, and an emblem pressed into his chest, the crest of the old Alliance. Forgotten by most, feared by some, and now reborn. Rhea stood in front of the signal tower, Taryn, beside her, his small hand in hers, both covered in ash and blood and light, and as the man stepped closer, he raised one hand slow and opened a sign of peace, his voice deep but kind. I am Commander Darien of Falcon Squadron. We heard the call, we saw the light, and now we answer. Taryn looked up, unsure, his fingers gripping tighter. Reyes knelt and whispered, it is all right. I think they're the ones Holt told us about, the ones who never stopped fighting even when the rest forgot. Behind them, Vex limped forward, bruised and angry, but alive, dragging a supply case with him. He squinted at the soldiers and laughed a dry sound. You folks are about 10 years too late, but I guess late is better than never. Darien moved past him, eyes scanning the broken wreckage of their ship, the burned trail across the ridge, the ruins of the enemy fighter. Then his gaze stopped on Holt, still unconscious, still bleeding, his armor cracked, but his grip on the boys tag tight even in sleep. Is he one of yours? Darien asked. He was one of those, Reyes said, but not anymore now he is ours, and if he dies there will not be another like him. The soldiers carried Holt onto a medical stretcher brought from the Falcon ship. Their medic worked fast, checking pulse, sealing wounds, starting a field drip. She said nothing, but nodded once to Darian, and that was enough. Taryn followed close, not speaking, not asking, just watching as the man who had saved him was lifted into a ship of strangers, with stars on their sleeves, and a past filled with war. Reyes walked beside him, her steps slow, her legs heavy, but she did not let herself fall, not yet, not until he was safe, not until she had done what Holt asked, not until the boy had a future beyond dirt and dust and hiding. Inside the ship the walls hummed with old power lines and backup systems, long repaired, long reused. Everything here had a story, every dent, every mark. And now this ship would carry another story, a boy pulled from the edge, a soldier who broke ranks, a smuggler who stayed, and a mother who pleaded with the universe and found something unexpected. Darian led them to the main room, where a long table stretched across the center, and hollow maps flickered into life. Around it battles old and new, zones red and green, names Reyes had only heard in rumors and whispers. You lit the tower, Darian said, and that means you knew what it was. How? Reyes told them about Holt, about the child, about the council, and the camps, about the lies and the truth, and the fear that ran through it all. She spoke with fire, but also with grief, her voice cracking at times, but never breaking. Vex added what he knew, not much, but enough: the deals, the patrols, the whispers about something hidden, something terrible, something the council wanted buried, and now exposed. Taryn sat on a bench beside Holt's stretcher, holding his hand, whispering things no one else could hear. The medic watched quietly, running scans and adjusting meds, her face soft with worry, but trained not to show it. Darian listened to every word, then turned off the maps and faced them. What you have done here will shake the order of things. The council will come. They will not forget this, and they will not forgive it. Let them come, Reyes said. We are not running anymore. Darian nodded, then turned to the boy. What is your name? Taryn looked up, his eyes unsure for a moment. Then he said, my name is Taryn, and I am not afraid. The room was silent for a moment. Then one of the soldiers placed a hand on his chest and bowed. The others followed, and Darian knelt down to Taryn's eye level and said, then you are one of us. Now you are family. In the days that followed, the Falcon ship moved from ridge to ridge, gathering more who had been waiting, more who had run, more who had believed the war was over and justice forgotten, and now saw a chance to rise again, not for conquest, but for truth. Riala was found 3 days later, walking across the salt flats with cracked lips and bare feet, carrying nothing but a torn cloth and a small key. The signal brought her to, and when she saw Reyes and Taryn alive, she smiled for the first time in years and said, I told you they would come. Vex fixed the ship. It took a week in most of his parts, but he got it flying again. Then he painted something new on the side, a silver line that curved like a rising sun, and beside it one word chosen by the boy: hope. Holt woke on the 5th day, coughing and groaning, but alive. Reyes was there, Taryn too, and when he saw them he whispered, you made it, and then he smiled and said, good, now we start something new. They held a small meeting in the center bay, not a council, not an army, just people who had chosen not to look away anymore. Darian spoke of allies waiting across the stars, old ships, hidden codes, still active networks that had never fully died, only gone dark. Reyes spoke of the camps and the mothers and the children and the pain and how it had to end. Holt spoke last, not for long, not loud, but strong and clear. He said, the war you think is over never ended, it just changed, and now we change with it, not to destroy, but to protect, to give voice to those who were silenced, to light the towers again, one by one, until even the council must listen. Taryn watched them all and felt something rise inside him, something he had never felt before, not just safety, not just freedom, something bigger, belonging. The Falcon ship became their base, their home, their message to the stars, and across distant systems, whispers began to spread that the light had returned, that the tower had been lit, that a human soldier broke the chains, that a mother's cry was answered, and that a child once doomed now stood among warriors with fire in his heart and truth in his hands. And somewhere in the black beyond the edge of maps and empires, the council stirred, angry, afraid, uncertain. For the first time in generations, they had been defied. and far beyond even them, something ancient, something waiting, felt the spark of change, and turned its gaze toward the little world where a boy had been saved.